So my next problem with Piwars attaching this bottom plate. Now this bottom plate, just to talk through what it'll do, it'll sit on the bottom of the robot, and there's captive nuts here to clip it to some pegs in the top. There's also some areas for some further nuts, which I will then screw a 8 AA battery box into. These long posts, the top here is designed to fit line followers too, and there's further captive nut slots there. Now this is great, except now I went and got dimensions from the internet about what captive nuts sizes should be, and there is actually one of the nuts that I would use. So these were printed hopefully to fit straight in. However, the truth is they don't. They are just that little bit too thin, and it was tricky because I didn't want them to be able to rotate, but I did want them to be able to fit in. So I'm going to have to go and spend a bit of time with a needle file, filing away to try and get them to fit. Now I think I went with, I think it was 6mm, maybe no, 5.9, because 6 was what it suggested was enough for the thing to free rotate. 5.9 should be just enough to stop it. But I think once it's 3D printed, I think these dimensions aren't entirely precise on the inside here. On the outside there, they are pretty good, but I think there's a little bit of extra material in there. So time for a needle file to file all three on each side, which is 6 out. Now, these ones here, if they don't quite fit, those are going to be tricky. And I think next time I print something like this, I might basically make the holes somewhat wider than they need to be, and try and account for I suppose, well, the 3D print walls and further tolerances. But yes, tricky one this. So, with a bit of filing and shoving, I've gotten all of those captive nuts in place there. For these ones, I'm just going to screw down until they go in. So the next part that's going to go on is this battery box, which is going to fit under here. And I'm going to use some countersunk screws to bolt that into there, and then I should be able to bolt that whole assembly onto the robot. Well, that module is basically ready to go on the robot, so I'm going to have to take those bolts back off, but I've just been using them to keep the captive nuts in just about the right place, and this will then assemble under the robot. Let's have a go. So, just when I thought everything was going nicely, these two big rings need to be moved about 5mm forward. There's not much space forward, but that's because the back of this battery box here interferes with the back of the motors, and it basically, where it fits in there, I'd accounted for the height of the motors down to between that space, but I'm not accounted for this space and the battery box itself. So at the moment the holes do not line up with the pegs. Back to fusion and printing for another time. One more thing, after I had such a job getting all of the filament, the support filament out of this, and stray stuff and what have you, and you'll notice it's all kind of messed up here. So what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to try and print it standing, so it goes that way up, which actually may reduce the print time by quite a bit. So I reprinted this part at a different orientation. A, it didn't quite fit. B, I had trouble with all the support when it was the other orientation. However, I was slightly afraid of, and I got a filament error because I actually emptied the cartridge. Now I was kind of expecting that. However, it turns out that, alright, it might fray a little eventually, but it's actually stuck all of the parts with all of the screws that I need in it. So the funny thing is, although it's kind of stopped, it's stopped close enough to the end that I can use it just as it is. Cool. Right, well, a quick update on the robot. So I've gone and put the camera module back on. and I've now fully attached the line sensor with the battery box glued. I know it's a bit of a defeat, but I've used some poly cement to glue that. I've not put all the batteries in until I do the wiring, and I'm currently designing the wiring where the Raspberry Pi, I'm going to stick a proto board. For Arduino, I might have to stick a proto board on top of that, because although it's got these beautiful servo style breakouts, I actually need some 4-pin JST type headers, JST-XHs, for all of the things I'm going to connect it to. So that's coming next.